right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on surviving your first year of college. Today's presentation has been formatted around how to academically, mentally, and socially survive your first year at university. These recommendations can be applied whether you're going into undergrad or graduate school and include both things that you should do and a few things you should definitely not do while you're in the US. Just a reminder for everyone that today's session is being recorded, so you don't have to take notes, and I'll not be able to see the chat box during the presentation, but we have a moderator who will help with all of those questions, and at the end, I'll answer any and all questions that you may have. So why don't we start by beginning with academics and save the social suggestions for towards the end, the more fun things, correct? So your academics are the most important reason of why you're in the US. And that first year is when you really start to build the habits that you're going to have throughout your program. So it's really important that you get to know your study preferences and set good habits early on in your career. So first and foremost, you need to get organized. Each semester you have between 3 and 5 classes, all with weekly reading and assignments that are going to be due at different times. The excuse of you didn't know is not going to cut it in order to get you an extension on your homework. And it's expected that you'll keep on top of your homework and come to class prepared each week. And so at the beginning of each semester, I suggest printing out the syllabus and find some ways to organize your assignments by week. This can be with a planner, a calendar, or some form of online software. However you do it in a way that makes you want to use it. I personally love writing out all my assignments so that I have something visual to look at and that I can carry around with me. And so I use different colored pens referencing different subjects, and I highlight major assignments that I'm going to need to remember to complete well in advance. And then I've trained myself so that when I'm done with an assignment, I get to cross it off in my planner, and that definitely elicits kind of a little bit of a satisfaction and happy feeling whenever I do that. Next, of course, is going to class. You may realize that when you're in your big lecture halls with 200 students, that there's no one around to make sure that you get up for that 8 a.m. lecture. That does not mean that you should skip it. And this is one of the number one reasons why students see a little bit of a dip in their grades that first year. They realize no one is going to force them to go to class. There's no parents around, so they often just won't go or won't attend. And often, it's important to go to class because often professors will teach you things in class that weren't in your reading, or they give away parts of the test that they're going to ask you later on. And so they'll be able to tell based on their tests and based on how well you do on those, whether or not you're actually attending class. There's often usually an attendance or a participation grade within your courses. So they will take note of who is and is not in class each day. And finally, remember to visit your professor's office hours. From experience, I know that this can be nerve-wracking. They're important people. They seem to know a lot. And maybe you don't come in with knowing all your questions. But it's important because professors are the people that give you research opportunities, recommendations for that first internship, or provide you with that recommendation letter for graduate school. They're the ones that are really there to help you with any and all of your questions. You don't necessarily have to get close to every professor, but the ones that are in your major or career field can be great assets to you. And of course, that's why you're drawn to them. You're interested in the same sorts of things. So if you don't have specific questions in a course, that's fine. You can go to them just to discuss anything, get to know them. If they're in a field you're interested in, you can ask them to, tell you about how did they get to where they are today? What was their career trajectory thus far? Which is helpful to you because that means that you get to know them, but also now you know the steps that they took in order to get to where they are. And if you aspire to be them, that's a really helpful conversation to have. And of course, going to your professor's office hours can certainly help your grades if you're getting some of that extra, more specialized attention. So in that first year, use your academic resources early and often. the habits that you set in that first semester and first year are going to be the same habits that you take on through your senior year or your fourth or second year, whatever program you can be in. Your library is likely to have events at the beginning of each semester teaching you how to use those resources. And so if you learn how to use those in your first year, when you come to that capstone thesis or your senior paper, you're going to already know how to use it. Schools will also have tutoring centers available all across campus, both in libraries as well as residence halls and cafeterias, where you can have some either more general writing labs, some help with your writing or grammar or whatnot, but others will focus on more specific classes like that Chemistry 103 course or finite math. So you can go in for both general and specific class topics. Career centers are also a resource that you want to use before you actually need them. So you'll find that resume culture in the US is different from in other parts of the world. And so these centers can help you edit resumes, cover letters, and prepare for interviews. They also have lots of knowledge on finding jobs and internships. So if there's something that you'd like to explore, but you don't really know how to navigate the US job and internship market, they can be especially helpful for finding those opportunities. They're very good at that. But most importantly is that with career centers, you don't want to go to them, second semester senior year. They can't help as much if they only have a couple months to work with you. It should be a relationship that you start at the beginning of your time in college, and then they can help you develop yourself professionally the whole time through. Now, of course, figure out your study habits now. College is a time where you're learning what works best for you. So take time that first semester to determine, do you prefer to work alone or study in groups? Do you want that quiet area in the library where no one's speaking? Or are you okay sitting in a coffee shop with people talking around you? I've discovered over the years that I tolerate less and less distraction. So now I can only listen to music that doesn't have words and is very quiet. And I work best when there's only one or two other people around me that are also working so that I'm also in that work mindset. I also prefer to work in large chunks of time. So I'll spend 6 hours in one spot. And so I prefer to be somewhere where I can find food, find coffee, that I can sit and really focus for long periods of time and get a lot done. For other people, they can't pay attention for 6 hours on homework, so they prefer to do it in 1 to 2 hour chunks. If you work well in groups, study groups can be a great way to meet new people, as well as people that have similar interests to you, as well as helping you with your schoolwork. So ask people if they want to study for a midterm together or meet up to discuss the homework, and get into the habit of starting your homework and projects early. No matter what you've managed to prove to yourself about getting work done in the hours before it's due, your best work is never done the morning of something being due. So always make sure about that. And additionally, just to note is that, citations and citing your references are very important in the US. And this is one of the primary reasons that international students will get into trouble with academic plagiarism is just because they don't know the citation styles. And that's perfectly understandable. So those writing labs are going to be really important for you in learning how to specifically cite your sources depending on what citation style your professor is looking for. Now, academics are the primary reason that you're at university, but your physical and mental health are more important than your education. And so you really need to remember to prioritize those things. You can't expect to get good grades unless you're healthy. And, so pay attention to your body and what it needs in order to succeed. College is stressful. You're having to adjust to a new culture, make new friends, all while trying to keep your grades up. And your health plays into how well you're able to do each of those things. So make sure to get enough sleep, whether or not that's deciding, okay, I have to stop studying each night at midnight. I will not go past midnight. That's when I put my books away. Or maybe you've ensured that I will not schedule myself for any 8 a.m. classes because I know that I'm a bit of a night owl and I won't go to bed before 2 a.m. So know that about yourself and figure out how are you going to get an adequate amount of sleep considering your activity and styles. So sleep is the only way that you're going to stay up for those 1 hour, 2 hour long lectures. And with that, know when to take breaks. If you know that you can't study for long periods of time, build in blocks for yourself where you aren't going to work so that you can focus during the time that you do block off for yourself to work. Differently from that is to make time for yourself. And this specifically means time to do things that you like to do. So allow yourself to watch the occasional TV episode or plan a day where you don't do any homework. In undergrad, I always planned that Saturdays were my day where I did not do any homework, and it was only either, my regular work schedule or something fun for myself to do. In graduate school, I always have classes on Wednesdays, and so Wednesday night is my time where I goofed off and did nothing related to school, knowing that I had quite a bit of time before my next class was going to arrive. This also means that if you're an introverted person and you're in a residence hall where you have a roommate, that you find time when you can have your alone time and you're able to have that social decompression. Don't feel pressured to always be that super extroverted person. Certainly there's a little bit of that's difficult in that first semester when you're trying to make friends. But after you really establish your friend group, recognize that you need time away from people and make sure to make that time for yourself. And then become familiar with your health resources on campus. Chances are you'll be required to have health insurance while you're at school, but there are many free health services that you'll be able to use through your university. Know where these services are and make sure to use them. Utilize the counseling center if you're going through a rough time, and make sure to go to the doctor if you're sick. Professors are pretty understanding of when students are truly not feeling well. So if you are able to go to the health center and they recognize that you're sick, professors are usually pretty understanding and give you extensions on homework. You just have to make sure to communicate with them about your needs. A somewhat common phenomenon in that first year is something we call in the US called the freshman 15. And when you go to college, you're no longer under the supervision of your parents, and you have to make meal and activity choices for yourself. And so many students are said to gain about 15 pounds that first year because they're not making healthy eating habits and they're not doing the same level of exercise that they might have done at home. So as I've said with most of my suggestions here, make sure to make those habits early. Eat healthy, get your fruits and vegetables, set aside some time where you are going to the gym, whether or not that's as a form of stress relief or you just decide to buy a bike and bike around your town. Those are great ways to get to know your area while also creating those healthy lifestyle choices. When you're coming to a new country, money is going to spend differently than what you're used to. It's going to take a while before you understand the exchange rate, as well as some things will be more expensive than what you're used to, and some things will be less expensive. So while you're here, you don't want to have to worry over money while you're studying and exploring a new country. It would be useful if you keep track of your expenditures using an app or just looking at your banking statements, and budget your money so that you can better understand where your money is going. It'll help. You don't want to have to be worrying over money when you're also worrying about that midterm or that test. So as much as you can begin to understand what the financial situation is like while you're here, will make it easier to focus on other things that are more important to you. And finally, this is really important. Make sure to keep in touch with your friends and family from home. The first semester can be isolating for any incoming student, not just an international student. And that first semester, you're trying to make new friends, and that's taking a while, and you don't know the food and the country and the town. And so the people that you have back home are going to be that support network while you're here. And so just make sure to, schedule that weekly call with your friends and family back home and figure out the time zone differences in order to make that happen. I think you'll be a lot happier for it. So that's just really important while you're here. All right, so let's talk about the fun things you should consider doing your first year. And let's start with social life and making friends. For those of you that live on campus, it's important that you get to at least know your roommates. This is someone that you're going to have to live with for the year, and so learning to live together will be crucial to you enjoying that time in that space. But even more so is that your roommate is going to be the person that you go to all those first events with on campus, those opening events all across campus where all of the different services and clubs and activities and opportunities are trying to make themselves known to you. And those are the things that you're going to go with with your roommates. So getting to know that your floor, however your residence hall is set up, and your roommate will help make a possibly large university feel much smaller. And so that's really helpful if you come from a small town. You're likely to find that making friends in college is harder than when you were young. As a child, you naturally had to make friends because people lived near you and you were in classes together, possibly for years. In college, you really have to develop relationships. You're not going to have constant classes with the same people, which means that no one is going to have to be friends with anyone else. You'll really have to develop those relationships. In college, you want to make sure to get phone numbers and make sure to follow up on activities. If you go to one activity with someone that you didn't know before, you want to make sure to follow up with that and invite them to do other things. You can't just expect friendships to happen naturally over time. Luckily, everyone is going to be in the same position as a freshman. No one will really come in knowing a lot of other people. And so they're going to be very open to doing those activities. And so that's an advantage for you. And a great way to do this at the beginning of the year on a college campus is through all of the free events. They're going to try and they want to show you everything that your campus has to offer. And a lot of that is going to be through free food to try and get you to those events. So take advantage of those things. There's a saying that if you pay for food that first week of school, that you're not doing something right, because your school wants to show off all that it has to offer. And so with that, universities have so many options for things that you can get involved in. Many will have hundreds of clubs, some sillier than others. One good way to stay in touch with your culture or the people from home is through different ethnic group clubs. So especially at a large university, chances are there will probably be a Ukrainian Students Club or just a overall European Student Association. And so these are ways that you can stay in contact with your culture and things that are familiar to you in an otherwise unfamiliar place. But of course, in terms of clubs, there are some that are related to service and volunteering. Some are related to interests and games and things. Any sort of club that you have an interest in, if it doesn't exist, you're able to make it. So there's so many opportunities there. If you want to play a sport, there are competitive and recreational teams. And sports culture is a huge part of the U.S. university culture, especially if you go to a big school. So in addition to playing sports in an intramural setting, you could also go to a sports game, football, soccer, basketball, all of these really big sports that are both just exciting for you and also really introduce you to the culture of the state and the university that you're at. So that's very exciting. And of course, you're going to be in the U.S. for probably 2 to 4 years, depending on your program. And so take the time to travel. There are built-in breaks throughout the year between winter break, spring break, Thanksgiving, where you have time. And if you don't plan on going home during those weeks, you're able to explore the town that you're in or the closest large city, or going really wherever you want within the country. You can absolutely explore that and take advantage of that. Social life, a university is there to help offset some of the stress of the academics. And it's just as important that you get involved in all of that. There's learning that happens outside of the classroom that you can only get through practical experiences of clubs and organizations on campus. So these are great opportunities to build your resume, as well as just de-stress and get involved in something that you really enjoy. A couple things that perhaps you should not do or be wary of when you are in the U.S. Please remember that the drinking alcohol is illegal if you are under the age of 21, regardless of if it is legal in Ukraine. You could get drinking tickets for that and get in trouble with the school if you were to be caught drinking when you are underage. Marijuana is legal in some U.S. states, but it is not legal in all of them, and it is not legal at the federal level. So essentially, this means that our national government says that marijuana is illegal, and so if for whatever reason a federal policeman or a federal agent were to find that you were doing this, even if it was in a state where it was legal, you might have issues. Marijuana drug offenses can result in you having your visa taken away. So just keep in mind, if you have the opportunity to use these drugs, that there are immigration implications for you doing so. All right. And with that, I believe we have the end of our presentation, and we are able to take any sort of questions at this time. I hope that for those of you that are on your way to college, that you're excited about it and that you're already planning all of the exciting things that you are going to do. University websites are great resources for you to learn more about the opportunities available on campus. And so while you're planning your travel and your experiences that you want to have while you're here, that you use those websites in the meantime before you can actually get on campus.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katie. For those of you who are joining us online right now, please feel free to type your questions into the chat box. I'm keeping an eye on that, so I'll give everyone a minute or two to think of your questions for Katie. But Katie, I wanted to ask, can you talk about what the syllabus is and what a student's responsibility is to it? Because syllabi don't exist in Ukraine.
Okay, absolutely. So the very first week of school, you have that first class, and your first class of the semester. And during this class, your professor is going to give you what we call a syllabus. And the syllabus outlines all of the expectations, assignments, and readings for the semester. So theoretically, after that first class, you are able to know everything that is going to be expected of you, broken down by week and broken down by assignments. They'll have all the descriptions of the assignments, how you'll be graded on those assignments, what readings you'll need to read each week. So after that first week where you've had all of your classes, it's really nice because you're able to take the syllabus from each of your classes, so 3 to 5 different syllabi, and really take a look at what is your semester going to look like. You'll be able to see which weeks are going to be heavier on work. Maybe realize, oh darn, I have 3 midterms this one week, which is going to allow you to both get excited about some of the things you're doing during the semester, as well as plan ahead for yourself. If you know that this one week, the 8th week of the semester, is going to be really hard, that maybe you'll be able to know to work ahead. So it's an outline of the entire course for the semester.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And at least in my experience, some professors are more, let's say, helpful than others in reminding you about assignments that are due. Yes. But some of them might not remind you at all and say, okay, turn in your papers. And, if you say, well, I had no idea, they'll say it was on the syllabus. So
Exactly.
yeah, students have a responsibility to know that. And can you say a couple words about Greek life as well, as some students may come across that?
Sure. So Greek life seems to be a somewhat American phenomenon. They are social organizations on U.S. campuses. Most of them will have some sort of mission statement. And generally, they're social organizations. They're typically split by either female sororities and male fraternities, with occasional ones that are intersex as well. But there's a recruitment process for them. So students, what we would call rush, but essentially it's a competitive process where you meet with a bunch of different sororities or fraternities, figure out, what is we would say the vibe, the social atmosphere, and work with those members to see whether or not this is a good fit for you. And so typically sorority members will live in large houses on university campuses, and it's meant to be, a sisterhood or a brotherhood. People that are all connected through the university and through their mutual interests and through, social connections. So it's meant to provide a community on campus for you. I will just say somewhat frankly that they're often associated with parties on campus. And so if you were ever to be invited to a fraternity or sorority party, just keep in mind, again, issues with alcohol and marijuana that may occur at these parties.
Awesome. Okay. So I see we've got one question. A viewer says, a friend of my father who immigrated to Germany once said that the most appropriate thing he did was to stop communicating with Ukrainians while he was in Germany. What do you think about that?
I'm coming at this as someone who studies the way students connect with university campuses, because that's my master's degree. But there's a lot of studies that say that there's good and bad to that. There's certainly occasionally there's stereotypes that international students will only hang out with other international students. And certainly, there's a level of comfort there. And so that can help you on a university campus, being around people that speak your language and will make Ukrainian food with you and understand what's going on in your country right now. That's not something to be discounted when you're in an unfamiliar place. That level of familiarity can really help you and provide you a level of support that other things can't. That being said, you're right. I think that there's a balance. You want to be able to connect with American students and really take advantage of all the opportunities that are unique to American college campuses. And so I think it's finding the balance there of keeping that support network for you, because there is power in the familiar, as well as being willing to, go outside your comfort zone and try new things and meet people that are different from you. And that is certainly, in many of the international students I've spoken with, one of the primary reasons that they want to come to the U.S. is to be able to learn a new culture and a new language and be able to communicate across cultures. And so you want to make sure that you're actually fulfilling that goal for yourself while you're here, because that's one of the primary reasons that you come to the U.S. And it's one of the primary reasons that people want to hire people that have that cross-cultural experience. But yeah, from all of the research on student development and ways students succeed on campus, is that you want to find the balance between that, because it is important to keep those ties to your home country, in addition to, getting to know U.S. culture.
Awesome. We've got a great question from Mikola, who asks, how often can I change classes? I mean, if I attended the class and didn't like it, can I change it soon?
Each university is going to have a little bit of a different policy on that. So obviously your courses will last about a semester, so 5 months, or if you're on a different sort of system, trimesters, quarters, there's different lengths of time that a course will run. And then typically, schools will have what they call an add drop period, a period during probably about those first 2 weeks of the semester where you go to a couple courses and you say, this is not really for me. I don't like this course. It was an elective. I don't technically have to take this course. So during those first 2 weeks, you can switch between courses pretty easily and typically without any sort of financial penalty involved for that. After that, there's a certain date by which you can drop a course. If you say, this course was just not for me, I made a bad choice, but I thought I could stick it out and I couldn't. Typically, schools will also have a sort of drop period that's a little bit later than that allows you to just simply drop a course if it's not working out for you. But after that, you kind of have to stick through the course till the end. But yeah, you typically have about 1 to 2 weeks at that beginning of the semester where you can try out the course. And if it's not for you, then you can just switch.
Mm-hmm. And what about changing or adding a major for undergraduate students, for bachelor students?
Again, depends on the university. Many students will find that majors need to be added as soon as you complete maybe 3-ish introductory courses. And once you take those courses and you get a satisfactory grade in them, then you're admitted to a major. That being said, adding majors and minors and certificates are fairly easy to do. You just essentially have to take the courses that are required for those majors. And depending on the major and depending on the school, you'll want to work with your academic advisor to determine, what's the best way to be admitted to this program? Or is there a sequence of courses that you would have me take of this one first and this one second in order to be admitted? In general, you really want to lean on those academic advisors, because if you're thinking of a medical major, but then also you want to do a law major, those combinations have a lot of courses involved with them. And so your advisors are really good at determining how you can make all of those courses fit together and in order to make those majors work. So some majors are a little bit more intensive than others, but in general, it's very easy to switch between them, and you just have to take whatever courses are required for that major in order to be admitted to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And would you agree that it also depends on the major in the university, but typically students have some time to figure out what exactly they want to study at the undergraduate level?
Absolutely. So at the undergraduate level, a characteristic of U.S. education is that we start with what are called general education courses. So in those first 2-ish years that you are at university, they're asking that you take a variety of courses. So you'll be asked to take math courses, science, social studies, humanities courses, and language possibly. And so they want you to be a well-rounded person, but they're also asking you to look at a variety of your interests in order to determine what you actually want your major to be. So it's built into the U.S. college curriculum, a number of courses that are there purely to allow you to explore your interests before you have to choose a major. So there's certainly plenty of time to explore a variety of interests without ever falling behind in what we would say is typical for students to take.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've got another question from Katarina, who asks, are there a lot of benefits to living on campus, or is it better to rent a room near the university? She is talking about for master's program.
For master's programs? Okay. Depending on the kind of transportation that is available, that might differ. So specifically for graduate students, there's not as much of a typically schools will have some on-campus housing available for graduate students. And so a benefit for that would be if you don't plan to have a car or a bike, those apartments or residence halls for graduate students will be close to campus so that you'll be able to walk or bus there. So in terms of transportation, that's certainly helpful. and of course being close to libraries and the academic resources that are available. Just the proximity of that is nice. That being said, those are going to be possibly maybe more expensive, or certainly they're maintained by the university. So you have less opportunities to look around and negotiate what kinds of things you're looking for in your living situation. Whereas if you were to choose to live off campus, you would be able to look at a variety of pricing for housing, a variety of amenities, utilities, whether or not those are included or not. So you have a little bit more flexibility in determining the kind of lifestyle and the kind of apartment that you wish to live in, but knowing that you won't be as close to all of campus and the resources available there if you're off campus. That's specifically looking at master's students. Certainly for undergraduate students, we would say that we'd recommend you living on campus at least the first year, and many schools will require you to do so because of just the value of that community living and being on campus and being close to those resources.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Camila's asking, if you get a bad grade on a homework or an assignment and it affects the scholarship, will the professor give opportunities to earn extra points? So I think what she's referring to is extra credit policies.
It's far less common to have extra credit at the college level. Occasionally a professor will say, hey, if anyone wants to write an extra paper, we might be able to do that. This is where, being in contact with your professors is really helpful. And this is where going to office hours and getting feedback on papers and assignments can occasionally work to your advantage if they're really familiar with you and what you're struggling with and what you're going through. Sometimes that's a good relationship to build if you're struggling. Additionally, if you have some form of scholarship that has academic requirements like that, you'll want to also work with your scholarship advisor, because they're going to understand if one bad class comes around and could jeopardize that. There are mechanisms in place to help students when they have those circumstances. So you'll just want to be in contact with your professor and your scholarship advisors to determine what's the best course of action. They might be able to work with you and say that so long as you're going with tutoring, we're going to allow this scholarship to continue to be in place. So, bad grades happen, and there's certainly a little bit of a slide, especially that first year as you're getting used to constantly speaking in English and writing in English and being in the U.S. academic culture. They understand that, bad grades happen. You just always want to be in contact with your professor and advisors about how you can boost those grades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Margarita's asking, should I apply for financial aid every year of university, of college?
Certainly, that's depending on your financial situation. But, it doesn't hurt to apply. No one's going to penalize you for applying for a scholarship. So we would always say, yes, you never know when something's going to come up while you're in college. Maybe you get sick, you break an arm, something along those lines. And so you never know when you're going to need to spend money you hadn't previously thought you were going to. And so by having some extra scholarship, that allows you to free up money for other things, both fun and necessary, if that's true. So I wouldn't say that there's any form of harm in applying for it. And there's only things to be gained by applying for scholarships. And additionally, if it's something that's merit-based, as in it's based on an achievement you had, those are things that you can put on resumes and say, hey, I had to apply for this. It was very competitive. So the winning of scholarships is also something that shows achievements for you as well as for financial aid.
Mm-hmm. And I can add to Margarita that when you're accepted to a university and they give you your financial aid offer for your first year, usually they will very clearly state like the terms of the financial aid. So typically they will say this is renewable for all 4 years of study, meaning that the financial aid they give you the first year, you will have all 4 years. And in that sense, you don't necessarily need to reapply for it for financial aid from the university. But if you do have a significant change in your family circumstances, maybe one of your parents lost a job or, there's some big financial change, you can appeal for more financial aid from the university. But exactly as Katie said, like you can still apply for external scholarships, and some colleges may even have scholarships that are only available to students after their first year. So it's like students almost have to sort of prove their ability to be competent in an academic, university academic environment, and then they can apply for more scholarships.
Sure.
Okay, if you are on a scholarship, is there an opportunity to get a job or an internship?
So that's just purely going to depend on the requirements for the scholarship. Some scholarships may say that we require that you also have a part-time job in order to do so, but I mean, that is just across the board, depends on the requirements of the scholarships. Most scholarships are given without some form of work requirement or internship requirement. So if you have a scholarship, chances are there's no sort of penalty if you also choose to get a part-time job or then engage in an internship. And maybe, Nellie, you have something in addition to that, but scholarships are kind of across the board, but most do not require any sort of work specifically for international students. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I mean, scholarships typically are merit-based or need-based. Right. Sometimes work study is considered part of almost a need-based scholarship where they guarantee you a job on campus, like as a form of financial aid. But in terms of whether or not you can have a job or an internship while you have a scholarship, like absolutely. Generally, those two things are held separately as long as you can just manage your time and everything like that.
Absolutely.
And someone has a follow-up question, by the way, what are opportunities for on-campus jobs?
Sure. So as an international student, chances are you'll be on an F1 visa, and so you'll be able to work 20 hours a week on campus. And so on campus is what we typically think of is on campus being paid by the university serving students. So for undergraduate students, this could be working in the library, working in the residence hall or the dining hall. Maybe if you're a graduate student, this could be research with a professor that you're getting paid for, or perhaps you're a teaching assistant, and so you're teaching Ukrainian to American students. So typically what we think is you're able to work anywhere on campus where your paycheck is coming from the university. So that's a lot of different things, working in buildings, working for recreational sports if you want to be an umpire or a referee or something like that. So there's a lot of opportunities on college campuses in order to get part-time work.
Is there any way that you would, does the advice differ between first-year undergrad students and grad students in terms of what advice you would give and how to prepare for your first year at an American college or university?
Oh,
since you've done both.
Since I've done both. I guess I feel like perhaps for an undergrad student, you have more time. Chances are you're looking at 4 years, and a lot of times your population that you're working with is a lot bigger. So your friends are going to come from a million different majors, and they're going to be from clubs and organizations and the sports teams that you're on, and as well as your major and in your classes. And so I feel like I'm always pushing undergraduate students to try whatever they're interested in and, go for those opportunities. And I feel like with master's students, you have a little bit of a better idea of why you're there. The program that you're in, you've had work experiences, you kind of just are a little bit more set in your priorities and your interests. And so when I see you come to a college campus, my thought is, get really close with your department. Chances are your master's program isn't going to be huge. And so that's really going to become your family in the same way that maybe your residence hall floor would be for an undergrad. And as a master's student, you're much more focused on the professional development. What internships are available for me, what research opportunities. I want to go to conferences. And so as you're preparing for your time, you have less time. Chances are you're in like a 1 to 3 year program if you're a master's student. And so you don't have as much time to explore. You need to know immediately once you're there, what are my opportunities? What can I start getting involved in? So I think that you want to do a little bit more research as a master's student, going in on planning out what are the opportunities that you know of and how can you really start taking advantage of them early, whereas undergrads just have a little bit more time on their hands to really explore those things. So I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is just you kind of want to hit the ground running as a master's student and getting involved in the things that you want to do because you don't have the same level of time that undergraduates do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 2 more questions here. I don't know if you'll feel comfortable answering these or I can answer them. Someone asked about finding financial aid for studying for master's programs. She specifically mentioned an MPA program or any programs for international students that cover all the college fees. It's always a popular question.
I'm sure it is. And it's something where chances are you're probably a little bit more knowledgeable on it because, finding them, they're either going to come through the admissions office or maybe an international services office. Unfortunately, it's not as common as it may be for domestic students to have those kind of all-encompassing scholarships. Specifically, if you're a master's student, you might want to look at university career sites for either research assistantships, teaching assistantships. We call them assistant instructor positions. So things where you're either teaching language or teaching an undergraduate course or something along those lines or helping with research. Because sometimes those forms of jobs are 20 hours a week, but then they'll pay for, say, tuition and maybe a stipend, a little bit of extra cash on the side. But those are just highly variable based on the university. They're more likely to be at larger research universities than they are smaller liberal arts colleges. Maybe you know some strategies for finding those, Nellie, as well, but I'm not well versed.
Yeah, I would say, we have different lectures on our YouTube channel about financial aid because it's a separate conversation. But I would say to just increase your chances of getting good merit-based financial aid from the university, merit-based scholarships. Just do as well as you can on, for example, for master's programs on the GRE. If you're still an undergrad, make sure you have really good grades from your bachelor's degree, academic achievements. Prepare for those standardized tests like TOEFL and IELTS. Just try to get as high of marks as you can on those tests because that'll help a lot. And exactly as Katie said, look at if financial aid is a big factor for you, then look at universities that would offer assistantships that can help pay for some of those costs. I'll be frank that full scholarships are extremely rare. So just don't depend on that. Probably most of you have heard of the Fulbright program, which does completely fund master's programs for Ukrainian students, but it's incredibly competitive. And if we're talking about directly from the university, it's incredibly rare. But the good news is that there are a lot of different sources of financial aid. So just try to diversify your sources. But if you're depending on 100% povnu stipendiu from the university, you are going to be probably disappointed. But we have lectures about that on our YouTube channel. You can contact Education USA and we can speak with you about that. Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat box. So I think as our final question, I just wanted to ask you, from both undergrad and your grad experiences, is there anything that you wish you had done differently? And what is one thing that you're really glad that you did?
Something I wish I'd done differently and something I was really glad that I did. So something that I kind of wish I'd done differently. So when I was going into undergrad, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I came in as an international studies major, and I knew that's what I was interested in. And I knew that I was interested in taking Chinese, and I was interested in Asian studies. So those were my two majors. And I planned out my whole 4 years. I said, I know exactly what courses I'm going to take. These are how they're going to overlap so that I can take the least number of courses and still complete two majors. And I figured out exactly where the overlap would be and how I would do that. And there are definitely parts of me where I am now thinking I have so many diverse interests. You know, I'm interested in urban planning, and I'm interested in like plant biology and all of these different things. I had the time to take those courses, and I don't know why I was so focused on only the courses that were in my major, especially now. You know, I was in international studies and East Asian studies major, but then in my master's program, I determined that I was interested at the intersection of education and internationalization, which is why I work with international students and international education. And so there are a lot of things where I regret not using my general education courses and my electives to the full extent that I was able to do. You know, I graduated in 3.5 years. My last semester was entirely spent taking language courses. So I had time. There is time built in to explore interests, and they don't all have to be in your major. And so if you want to take a cooking course, take it. If you want to do bike mechanics, take it. You have the time, and you're not going to fall behind just because of those choices. So that's something that I probably regret most about my undergrad. Things that I enjoyed the most. I mean, I don't know how much this would apply to you all or if you want to, but study abroad was one of the most life-changing experiences I had as a undergrad. And so obviously you'll be taking advantage of that, studying abroad full time. So that was certainly one of them. And so I don't really want to touch on that because you're doing it just by effect of being here.
Would there be opportunities for international students in the U.S. to study abroad in another country for a semester?
Absolutely. Yeah, so certainly you're absolutely, just as I was saying that there was time to take electives, there's time to study abroad. And oftentimes, you know, the scholarships for study abroad are pretty much open to whoever is planning to study abroad. So you'll find less issues finding opportunities for that. And so you're right. I mean, it's what solidified my choice to do international education is what study abroad did, as well as providing me the language skills that I wanted and needed. So certainly work with your academic advisor. It's pretty typical that students may study abroad junior year so third year. And that was just an incredibly powerful experience for me to get that cross-cultural experience. And yeah, that's open to anyone, and there's time to do it no matter what your major is.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any other questions, but if students have any follow-up questions for you, I guess, are you okay if they get in touch with us and we get them in touch with you?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, so Katie's been working with us at Education USA Ukraine this year virtually. She'll be with us for just a little while longer, but if you have any questions, just get in touch with Education USA Ukraine. We're on Instagram, Facebook. This video will be on our YouTube along with all of our other lectures, so there's always ways to get in touch with us. Thank you so much, Katie, for joining us, and I hope you all found this useful. Thank you so much, Katie. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.